Hey, you guys, thanks for joining today. Today on Beyond the Storm with Selena, we have Tyler Collins. Tyler is somebody that I met in a recovery class for a credentialing class through the state of Missouri. I'm really excited to share his story with you today. Tyler has had some long-term recovery and works in the recovery industry. So join me today with welcoming Tyler to our show. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Selena.
Yeah, no problem. So I have purposely not asked you too much about your story because I like it to be authentic when we're on camera. But start me in your journey. I'd like to know a little bit about who you were before addiction grabbed on. And I want to know, take me through that journey of what that was for you.
Well, I guess that's I started using when I was 8, so I wasn't much of a person before. I grew up with probably a more non-traditional lifestyle. Like a loving home. My my mother, my biological father, got divorced when I was 8. And my mother married what was truthfully had been her pot dealer, but he'd been in my life as long as I could remember. And that man ultimately did become the person that I would call a father because like he treated my mother right and loved me.
Okay.
Um, and so he bred horses and grew weed for a living. So it wasn't necessarily traditional, but it was definitely. I had a great childhood. I was loved. There was no reason for me to, turn to drug addiction other than the fact that was just the lifestyle that I was used to,
It's
like
what you see.
yeah,
It's what you were accustomed to.
yeah. And, and so when I started smoking pot at 8 and, at 12, uh, like I tried Oxycontin for the first time.
Wow, 12.
And very prophetically, my best friend at the time, still a really good friend of mine now, who's in long-term recovery himself, really proud of him. He said, "If this is what this is like, I'm gonna be addicted to this stuff." And at the
So it was
time,
recreational. It wasn't like you'd been given it for dental work.
no,
It
no,
truly was, "Hey, I got this. Let's try it."
let's try it. Yeah, but that's the time and place we grew up in.
Mhm.
A lot of people, at least in my experience, um,
And share with our audience where you're from.
I'm from Lebanon, Missouri, small town in southwest Missouri, the 417.
Mm.
There would be the 4 if for anybody that's done any prison time in the state of Missouri.
Yeah,
That's why
I laughed when you said that because Stephen had 816
yeah,
too.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
You got to rep your area code, and like that was home to me. It really was. I never thought I would leave.
Mhm.
Uh, I never thought I'd get out of there. Truthfully,
Yeah.
like I never had
So you
dreams bigger.
rephrase that. I never thought I would leave to I never thought I'd get out of there.
Now looking back,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. And like I graduated third in my class, summa cum laude. Had attended the Missouri Scholars Academy. Had got an academic scholarship to Mizzou. I mean, there was no.
Okay, so let's take that back. So you had drugs were hand in hand with having scholarships?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, at the time, like, I mean, I feel that a lot of people that turn to addiction, we fall on a spectrum. Like either like you just did it because that's what was around, or I
Mhm.
did it as some sort of form of escapism. Because like I wasn't necessarily. I mean, I struggle in social settings, like, so for me, drugs were a solid coping mechanism that I'd used my whole life.
I truly believe that people self-medicate for one reason or another. Maybe that's where it starts at, but I do believe that it is the relief that you're looking for
Yeah,
until it becomes the problem.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, so I started, and I mean, I grew up in, and we didn't necessarily have the most money in the world,
Yeah.
so, but it was easy for me to make money, and especially, like pills were everywhere at the time, and everyone, like it was a time and place where everyone was beginning to smoke pot, didn't matter how old you were.
Right.
And I just so happened to be at a point where like I had ready access to all of them
Right.
and
Yeah.
was
Your
intelligent enough
mentor
to
was right
profit
there in
from
your
it.
house.
Yeah, and I wouldn't put it off on my dad, but yeah, my brother. So me and my brother's 35. He's in long-term recovery now too. He for 10 years, from 2010 till 2020, him and I were only out of prison together for 9 days. One of us was always in prison except for a 9-day span. I'd got out
I can
and
relate
yeah,
to that story.
yeah,
I can relate to my son, his best friend, who he called his brother,
yeah,
um, they rotated in and out of prison and never were out at the same time. And when his friend would be out, first person he'd call would be me. Hey, can I come to the farm? I need to get away. I need to be down there in a safe place. And he'd come to the farm and he'd work for us. And then when Stephen would come out, Chris was already back in. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. It's a common thing, like I mean, just I feel like, yeah, I mean, like that's a really common occurrence, like that's why I stayed in prison as long as I did because I was comfortable there. Like that was I often tell people now that the only place I didn't feel alone was in prison because like I didn't know how to I would get out and and begin a relationship immediately and treat the woman horribly because I didn't know how to love her, let alone myself.
Right.
And then ultimately be back in prison in sometimes just a matter of weeks, months at the most.
So let's back up and tell me the first time you got in trouble that put you with Department of Corrections.
I was 17 years old the day I graduated high school. Lake Area Narcotics Enforcement Group, LANEG, raided my house, caught me with $71,000 cash and 26 pounds of marijuana.
Okay, that blew me away.
Yeah. So what ultimately got pled down to state trafficking and distribution. I took a 10-year sentence
That
for.
is an enormous amount of cash.
It was I mean, it was a lucrative business to be in, still is. It's just legal now. Those cases have since been expunged, even. Oddly enough. Like that's something that I still come to terms with now. Is like I for a long time was really bitter about feeling like they stole my youth for something that in less than a decade they were going to
They took,
expunge.
yeah, that would be, who I got to sit with that one for a second because I would be angry about it too. Um, just like you, our family experienced a lot of Department of Corrections. And for people who don't have that experience, they have no idea the dirty part of that business, and families that are traumatized by the Department of Corrections. So I can totally relate to what you're feeling. I mean, Steven served time on things that he didn't do, and lots of people do.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some bitterness there too. Yeah.
I mean, I would now work in a good program. I would tell you that I've got over that because I was good for it, and I knew it was illegal when I was doing it. There was a time in my life where I was bitter for it, but now I'm very
The look on
culpable
my
for my
face is
actions.
because we've had the same conversation. I didn't do that. I go, no, but how many things did you do
Yeah,
that you didn't get in trouble for? So
absolutely.
yeah,
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 like there wasn't a case that they didn't charge me with that I was not very aware I was breaking law and
right,
and very guilty of. So
yeah.
and now I'm happy to be able to say that because like I feel as
You
a
take
man. Yeah,
accountability. Yeah, that's maturity and accountability that frees you from being angry and resentful for sure.
absolutely.
How was your parents during that? Even if that was a lifestyle, there surely had to be some struggle with a parent.
Yeah, I mean, neither my mom nor my dad had ever done any prison time. It was definitely a generational thing. Like they were stuck in the middle between, having grown up, like upper middle class, and they turned to drug use in their youth. My dad was 16 in 1969, so it was a point where like that was just the culture that he
It
grew
was
up
very
in.
much the culture. That
Yeah,
was the end of Vietnam and
yeah.
as men coming home. Yeah.
So yeah. So, but he never, the Nixon drug law, that was just really starting to, come into effect, and then obviously with Reagan, like then when they really started to institute mandatory minimums. So my parents were caught in the cusp of they were using, and it wasn't really something that you had to worry about going to prison for.
Mhm.
And then, prison. This is obviously personal opinion, but prison privatization and the prison industrial complex became a huge deal. It became a money making. It became. I mean, it's a way to make money.
It's a
And
for hire process.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so and
Profit, I should say.
then Purdue comes out with OxyContin, in the mid '90s, and they open Pandora's box on that. And for my generation, that's what we turned to.
Yeah.
There was just pills were so readily available that I can't tell you how many people I've lost to it. And there was a time where hell, I couldn't go to the end of my driveway without someone trying to give me some pain pills.
And what I find ironic about it is just this week alone, I made a TikTok comment, or I made a TikTok video that basically stated um, there was a lot of people in this community that enabled Stephen. He was a quadriplegic. How is a quadriplegic person who can't use their hands? There's obviously enablers involved in that. And somebody locally seen it, was offended that I was saying that about our community. But what I was trying to explain to them is the opiates to this generation was the marijuana of our generation. And that we all probably smoked a little marijuana back in the day and nobody said anything about it because it wasn't killing us. Where the opiates now are taking this entire generation away from us. And that you can't say, oh, no, it's not happening in my community, because then you become part of the systemic problem by saying, not everybody in our town's doing it. No, 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 they're not. But we're looking the other way.
Yeah, we're culpable. Absolutely.
Yes, we know it's here. It was here before my son came to this community. It's still here now. Um, and so and so I think what you just described was from your parents' generation to your generation, the level of drugs that have changed and the grip it took on with addiction. It's a
Absolutely.
different kind of addiction,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know?
And especially even just in my time, like it there's just been waves of the opiate epidemic.
Yeah.
Like for like first it was Oxycontin, and I can tell you the month in the year that Oxycontin switched formulas to be less readily injectable, September 2010. And within a couple of months, heroin was a thing, and like for like at least for my small town, it was that fast. Small town, middle America, and we were doing heroin,
Yeah.
and
Right
then
here in this small little community, I'm really involved in prevention. I joined a lot of coalitions when Stephen passed away. I'm now part of the Recovery Court program that just recently was invited to be a part of that. I work with the local PD. Instead of being angry at them, I'm going to work with them
absolutely,
because I can't expect change if I'm not willing to get in there and be uncomfortable to work to help make change. So I had some pretty uh, honest statistics of what was happening in this county based on who I'm working with. And we just did have a first overdose with fentanyl and tranq
yeah,
in this community.
absolutely,
So it's here,
yeah,
because
oh,
2 or 3
absolutely,
months ago, they were all saying, we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen it yet. And I said, it's coming.
yeah,
It's coming. It's already out in the city. It's headed here. And it was probably already here. We just hadn't had an overdose of it.
exactly,
So, it's kind of funny that these little small hidden communities, they're not immune to any of it. As a matter of fact, it's probably happening more down here because nobody's looking at it. Nobody's it's hidden down here off the beaten path. It's way off of I-70.
yeah.
Nobody's looking at it down here.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like that would be the third and the fourth wave of, like when the illicit fentanyl, like any synthetic opioid really. And now we're seeing synthetic opioids with tranquilizers, metatomidine, especially, xylazine,
Yep.
that create an even more dangerous drug combination because
The
the
newer fentanyls that are coming out, the cart. Yeah.
fentanyls, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, at least as strong as the any synthetic opioid is, at least thankfully, Narcan is still effective on it. When you start, talking about metatomidine and xylazine being mixed in, and the Narcan's not effective against the tranquilizers, it becomes a very scary like situation to
Yeah.
be in. Like
Yeah. Um, so, so in my community, 2 years ago, I had stood in, they had a community fentanyl information um, community meeting. And I had stood in that meeting and stood and said out loud for the very first time to an entire small community, I was the mother of a drug addict
Mm.
because I wanted them to see we're here in this community. And I basically shared with them, if you're not carrying Narcan, you're going to come across somebody. You should be carrying it. Even if you don't know anybody, you might walk into a restaurant and use a restroom and somebody's in there overdosing. Do we wait for 911? If you do, they're not going to make it. So I started really pushing Narcan in our community. I had a lot of pushback until I finally broke it down in this meeting. I said, Narcan, no, it does not probably slow down the use of drugs. Yes, I can see where you think that that would make it more reckless with their drug use. But what Narcan does is it prevents a death from happening for a possibility of recovery.
Absolutely.
But without Narcan, there's no recovery. There will be no recovery. There will be a funeral. There's no decisions to be made except for where you're going to bury your loved one. But at least with Narcan, it allows you to have a conversation. It allows you to continue to have hope. It allows you to continue to work towards recovery. Without it, there's nothing left.
Yeah, I often tell people that, if you want people to get better, they have to be alive to do that.
Yes, exactly. Very good. I love that. And that's kind of how I look with handing out Narcan. In my community, I have a no barrier medical box that's been placed at a clinic here in town where I personally supply it. I'm a not-for-profit, so I personally supply it along with the clinic. But we keep it where you don't have to make a phone call to the police. You don't have to try and flag down the EMS. Literally, it's on the outside of a building, 24 hours a day, access to it. And if you take 3 boxes, that's fine. I'll be there tomorrow and we'll put more in there.
Yeah.
So, the Narcan right now is the only tool that we have in order to be able to get them to hear that they're worthy of recovery. If there's somebody who's deep in active addiction, that Narcan is the only thing that is standing in between life and death.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is a blessing. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, also ironic, that the same companies that manufacture Narcan were some of the companies that introduced the opioid epidemic to begin with.
I know. I knew you were going there with it. I knew you were going there with it.
It's a strange thing. I mean, we're blessed that it exists. It's kept me alive more times than I care to recount.
Absolutely.
But it's a systemic problem that is going on to this day, though.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're basically, you're at 17 and you enter into the Department of Corrections.
Yep. Absolutely. 17, I do 120 days in Missouri Department of Corrections. I get out, and I made it 7 months before I was sent back on a 10-year sentence. And so I wound up.
Was that new charges or that?
No, it was the same. It was the same charge because, like I said, I was really bitter.
So that was your
So
backup.
at this point, I'd lost what I thought was going to be a successful future, and so I didn't see any reason why should I change what I was doing. So I went back to exactly what I knew, and 7 months, they sent to prison to do a 10-year sentence. I'd just turned 18. And so I was for the next 6 years, I made it out 28 days. And truthfully, I made some of my most close friendships. I look back, I don't want to say fondly on my time in prison, but I also won't look back with any sort of shame or regret. It definitely formed me to be who I am today, and I'm happy. So,
and I completely understand that. Having a son who spent a lot of years in the Department of Corrections, you go through a very traumatic period of time and you become bonded with certain people because you both have that lived experience of surviving it. So I never got hung up over so-and-so from the joint, he's calling. I never got hung up on that.
Yeah.
The only thing I ever got hung up on is, are they attending any meetings?
Yeah.
If they're in recovery, I'm all for it. If they're not in recovery, they're not welcome.
Absolutely.
Those were my boundaries.
Look, and so I have to say, so with the Missouri Department of Corrections, when I started doing time, there were hardly any vocational programs.
Yeah.
And in the last 10 years, this is something that has to be said. They've really instituted a lot of vocational study programs and started to partner with Ashland College to offer college degrees for prison offenders.
Yeah, I've often wondered because Stephen was never, and I don't know that Stephen would have gone that direction. He was very much stuck in the mindset, going back to what he knew.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to see that. I know that the dog program was something he loved. He wasn't able to be a part of that, but he always loved it when somebody in his unit was a part of the program. puppies on parole or something like that. Yeah. So I'm all for doing anything other than what we've been doing.
Absolutely.
I am all for some kind of reform because Stephen came home broken, and like many other men and women who come home from prison.
Absolutely.
If you don't give them something to work on, there's nothing, there's no rehabilitation happening. Um, I have a box that I have 13 years of letters that were written home. And nowhere in those letters did he ever talk about wanting to commit crimes or planning to come back to prison. Every one of those letters talked about what he wanted to do, what he was going to try to do, what his hopes and dreams were. Those letters to me represent all of what his intentions were. But then you take away the ability to do it, all you're left with what you knew prior.
Absolutely.
So, you know, the Department of Corrections left a pretty hard, bitter taste in our mouth. So any reform programs I'm on board with.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's so much more work to be done.
Oh yeah.
That's something that but it is nice to begin to see that like a literal corrections being made, like offering some sort of I mean you have to give someone, a career, like some sort of other way to make money,
Yeah.
because like that's what we fell back on,
Right. The
was
rotating door in and out
yeah,
of prison,
when
give
you
them a chance to not come back.
absolutely, yeah, give them a life, give them a livelihood,
Yeah.
and, like, that's something that I think, they're really gonna start to lean on, and I hope to see the prison population, not just in Missouri, but in the United States start to decline,
Absolutely.
because, like, we are the land of the free, and with the largest prison population in the world,
Right.
so
Right. I know I've often said that um, the amount of people that we have in institutions, in prisons in the United States, how is it that people are so uninformed? Because the number of people we have in prison population is a representative of almost every family out there. Somebody in that family has had an experience with being incarcerated.
absolutely,
So um, the ill-informed is simply the people who choose not to look at it
absolutely,
because it's harming our families as much as it's meant to be putting people away to protect the communities. It's also harming our families.
absolutely.
So,
And on average, 70% are nonviolent drug offenders,
right.
So, like has to be some sort of better option,
Yes.
you know?
And I got to tell you, I got to plug. I'm sitting on a recovery court program in Johnson County, Missouri,
Yeah,
and their return rate is so low. But there's a judge in this community that really took on this project of taking on to this recovery court program, and it has changed his opinion about the 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 people that you can reach early, that early intervention, having such a high success rate with early intervention. It's changed his opinion about how we treat and service those people. What are the missing links in their support system that keeps them going back to jail or making those choices to get high? What are those missing links? And so his community is filling in those missing links. Whatever the need is for that person, they have to communicate it, and then their team goes to work to try to help it. You just got evicted from your apartment. Okay, let's get you another apartment found. I
absolutely,
mean, that's a recovery program saying, we're not going to look the other way since you're unhoused. We're going to help you get into housing.
absolutely,
And that is exactly the need that's the stopgap to prevent the continuance of down that road. If all they're trying to do is survive and drug dealing is all they know to survive, that's what they're going to go to. You take away the need, you you work on the solution.
absolutely.
So how many years did you end up being in Department of Corrections altogether?
Um, just over 8.
Okay.
I 6, 6, and then I was out for 4, nearly 4, and, had built what would from the outside looking in was a successful life, had a cabinet shop, and was still using behind the scenes, and, truthfully, it just I went back to what I knew was trafficking marijuana.
Mhm.
And when my dad got sick, um, when my dad got sick, excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
When my dad got sick, things just kind of spiraled, like the house of cards that I had built around me, started to fall apart. And I turned back to the needle. And within a matter of months, was sitting back in county jail, waiting to get sent to prison. And uh, it saved my life, and I did 2 more years. There's not much. There's not really much to highlight throughout that whole time. I was a pretty simple person, and hadn't done anything but, just leave a wake of destruction in my path.
Yeah.
The one good thing I did was, like, my mom had passed away while I was in prison for my first time down, or for the 6 years. And
I'm
so
sorry to
when
hear that. That had to been hard.
it's gonna happen to all of us. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's a sad fact. But I did learn from that. And when my dad got sick, I put everything aside, sold the stake in my cabinet shop. Everything fell to the wayside to spend the next 13 months with dad. And like, I would spend every dime I make for the rest of my life to do that one more day.
I love that. I love that.
And
That's that connection or that bond between you and your dad.
Yeah.
I can understand that. Our family's been kind of that way too.
Yeah.
I know we've got flies here. I'm sorry. We live on a farm.
No problem at all.
It's humid outside, so we're gonna have flies.
Nice.
They're just extra guests along for the ride. Um, so you were you with your dad when he passed then? Were you home out of prison?
I was out of prison. If I were to be just upfront and honest, like, he was 69 and sick, and I gave him some fentanyl, and he went to sleep, and he just didn't wake up. And, like, I carry a lot of guilt and feel like they didn't say it was an overdose, but in my mind, like, I'm culpable for it. And because we'd been using together for the entire time that he was sick, we'd been using together my whole life.
Yeah.
And that's probably like
So he was at the end of his life.
yeah, he was ready to go. He's ready to go be with my mom. That's what he always said.
Yeah.
And like, if there were things that I could take.
I'm gonna ease your feelings there. My mother had COPD, and she was the quintessential snooty grandma.
Right.
Okay. Um, Drugs was never her world. My son actually got to the point where it scared her to be around him, and she was scared to death of the pain medication that they prescribed to her because she was afraid she would become addicted to it after watching Steven.
Yeah.
And I had told her, Mom, you're not going to be alive long enough for it to matter. You need to take your medication because COPD is, they basically are suffocating.
Yeah.
So taking that type of medication relaxes them where they're not panicked. And my mother had gotten to the point where she was basically texting me because she couldn't speak anymore. And she kept trying to tell me that I'm not taking my meds. I'm holding on to my meds. And I never quite caught on to what she was trying to tell me. And she promised that she would hang on long enough to see my youngest son graduate high school. And the following night, she couldn't make it to his graduation, but we recorded it, took it over, and showed it to her. And the following night, we had a big bond party for his senior, graduation party. And my mother took all of her medication and went to sleep.
Right.
And she texted me before she went to sleep to tell me she chose her ending. She had control of her ending,
Yeah.
and that was what she planned.
Yeah.
And it was very painful when it first happened, but then I realized that crazy old coot, she was in control of everything the entire time, and she went out on her terms.
Right.
So, in some ways, when somebody is suffering like that, I think that that's more dignity than watching them suffer.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but it's still hard. It's still hard because our life changes. When you lose a parent, your life changes from that point on.
Absolutely.
So after your dad passed away, what was life looking like for you then?
Um, I mean, I was ready to go back to prison, because I didn't have anybody left.
Mhm.
I did have a woman in my life, um, that was a good woman,
Mhm.
Amanda. I still talk to her to this day. She's actually in recovery too.
Awesome.
It's really cool. I'm really proud of her. And I wasn't prepared to be the man that she deserved at the time,
Mhm.
and so I, just continued to make poor choices, and wound up getting sent back to prison, and yeah, so did 2 years, and then that's when I got out is when my life really started, um, the I'm happy now, so.
Well, I'm sitting here kind of walking through that. So everybody that your family is no longer here, and so you're coming home from prison for the first time with no family.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that that looked different. I'm
Yeah.
sure that that made a change in probably how you're going to attack it this time.
Yeah. Well, and my brother, like I said, he actually attended he went to a program called Fort Good Shepherd in Cuba, Missouri, when he got out in 2020, and that's where he found recovery, and it was
Who runs that program? Do you know?
it's a Mission Gate program. I couldn't tell you the particular director's name.
I've heard of that program. That's
Great
why.
program.
Okay,
Great
great.
program. Shameless plug, not as great as the Healing House. But
It's true.
but great program. It's got good recovery for a lot of people that need it.
I love it.
And it changed his life, and at his behest, I entered into a program myself when I left prison, and now I
So did you leave prison straight to a program?
straight to the Healing House.
That's
So it
awesome.
was like the day I got out, my brother picked me up, brought me straight to where I still reside.
So coming home from prison for anybody who's listening to us, coming home from prison is it's a culture shock, and I've watched Stephen do that multiple times. He rotated in and out, and it's like bringing home an infant and introducing them to, a crazy world.
Yeah.
And, sensory overload and too many choices in front of you. And it's just, it's a challenge for anybody coming home who's spent very much time. Stephen, a lot of times, would end up being in the hole for long periods of time while he was in prison.
Yeah.
So that was, he was already at a deficit before he even walked out of the gates of prison. So did you experience any of that? Was it
Oh yeah.
culture shock?
I would say just moving to Kansas City would be a culture shock in itself, let alone coming from prison.
Yep, I hadn't really thought of that, but you're right.
Like
You're used to a small
small
community.
town. Yeah, never thought I'd live in. Never
I'm not
thought I'd
going to
live in
that
a city.
city.
Yeah, and so just coming there, especially having come from prison, yeah, but coming to Northeast Kansas City of all places, we're at best hood adjacent, at
Yes.
best. So
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of my audience hears me talk about Northeast. That was Steven's stomping grounds. Um, the phone store just down the street from the Healing House is where he always did his phone business. You know, I still struggle to drive through that area,
yeah,
and I go to the Healing House quite often for different events, and I still struggle. I usually have to get on the phone with Nina and talk to her while I'm driving through there. And Nina and him, um, Nina and him have had so much criminal activity down in that area. She just, we just did this documentary, and she told the story of a shootout in the streets down there in Northeast.
absolutely.
And so every time I drive down through there, I run that visual through my head of my son being chased by another vehicle and they're shooting at each other. And you moved right into that neighborhood.
Right into it. Yeah, it's Mr. Rogers' neighborhood for me now.
Right?
Like it's home.
Right.
Like
Well, and I always have said to Stephen, you get clean anywhere you want to get clean.
absolutely.
Moving you into a neighborhood that you think is a bad neighborhood, you usually bring the bad to the neighborhood. So if you want to bring the good to the neighborhood, you're welcome to it.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, I would all all the credit to, obviously, I mean, to my higher power,
yeah,
and thanks to Mom, Bobby Joe Reed, and Joey Thomas there at the Healing House.
yeah,
Like
pretty amazing people.
yeah, you drive up and down St. John Avenue, and like our entire program is a community-based model,
Well, and it looks like a campus now.
Yeah,
I mean, you've
absolutely.
got multiple buildings
9
down
men's
there,
houses, 7
right?
women's houses,
Yeah,
3
you've got
apartment
Cullen's
buildings.
house that's now right there, which is my friend who purchased that house and donated it. So,
Absolutely.
um, so it's kind of I had always heard about Healing House because my son was obviously needing recovery, and every time we talked about what our options were, Healing House was always thrown out there at every step of the way, and and then after he passed away, multiple people who are associated with the Healing House kept reaching out to me. Hey, you need to come to this event. You need to come to this event. And I did. I started going to these events and I got to meet, I've met Bobby Joe a couple of times. I've met a lot of the other volunteers that are there. I have met multiple people in the housing programs. And I sit in awe at Bobby Joe because I don't have enough years left on my life to be able to accomplish what she has accomplished in the recovery community, but man, am I enamored with what she's done and the hope that she's created and cultivated in the people that are in her program. You know, um, and that's kind of how when you and I kind of got introduced on that Zoom call, I when you had said that you were associated with the Healing House, and I said, first of all, I knew that's a great program.
Yeah,
So whoever has seen in you to put you in step you in line, I knew that there was probably a great story underneath it because I didn't ask you your story. I wanted to hear it from you the first time here with everybody else. But whatever you have accomplished through the Healing House, I know you've been surrounded by good people along the way.
blessed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you came into the Healing House. What year was that?
Last year, truthfully,
Yeah,
the beginning of 2024.
great.
And now I manage the reentry program for. I mean, I'll day one pick a guy up from the bus stop, tell him welcome home.
Yeah,
Like, hey man, we don't have to live like that anymore.
yeah.
They'll come to my house is a cornerstone house. It's the reentry and beginners house for all of the men entering the program of Healing House.
How does that make you feel to go do that? Tell me the first time you went to go pick up somebody.
It's magic.
Yeah,
It's where the magic happens, man.
yeah.
Um, the first guy that I picked up, him and I went skydiving on Saturday together. Yeah,
Oh my
it's
gosh.
yeah, yeah. So like you build a bond, like
Yeah,
I'll never be alone again.
yeah.
And I do want to back up with something when you were talking about mom a second ago. I think I can speak for Bobby Joe, and like she would tell you that she couldn't have done it without Jesus.
Oh yeah.
I do want to plug that for mom
Oh,
because
absolutely,
like
absolutely. I've sat with her enough to know that that is, her relationship with Christ is very obvious, and she's not embarrassed or ashamed to share about it because I think it's been the focus behind everything that has happened good in that program. You know.
absolutely,
I do believe recovery has, um, everybody's entitled to their own path of recovery.
absolutely,
I personally feel like that higher power relationship is so important in that recovery process.
it is.
So,
And I lean on even just a group conscience, a power greater than myself.
yeah,
I don't care how you define it,
right.
as long as you're not alone and
Yeah.
and seek advice and counsel from some power outside yourself, you found a higher power that you can work with, and
I'm
you'll
glad that you described it like that. I have a younger son who has struggled, has had some struggles, has gone through a outpatient program, doing well, but struggles with the higher power.
Oh, yeah.
And that was hard for me as the parent
Yeah.
because I raised him in a church and it's been a part of our lives. It was what was successful for even the short periods of sobriety that Stephen had. It was with his higher power.
Yeah.
And so he's been introduced to a different viewpoint of seeking higher power without so much of the Christ-based part of it, and that's been a hard one for me to be able to step back and let that be his journey.
Mm. And
But
he'll I can only tell you my experience.
mhm,
You know, when I got to the healing house, I was an atheist.
mhm,
Firm, told them that the day I got there.
yeah,
And because they didn't tell me anything other than, well, welcome home and we love you. Like I began to lean on my first GOD was a group of drug addicts, you know, and
yeah,
like I found some guys that I trusted that had what I wanted. And then, you know, through the fellowship of that and, you know, listening to what they had to say and never being told what to believe, only ever ask, what do I think? You know,
mhm.
I've begun to really cultivate a relationship with my higher power and I mean Jesus, you know.
Well, that
Um,
was deep.
but
I'm sorry, but
it'll
that
take
was
time,
deep. I
you know.
appreciated that.
So
Yeah, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm letting him discover
yeah,
his own path there. I know that my both my sons' personalities, I push very hard. They're not gonna, they're gonna stop listening. So I've said, okay, I'm gonna step back. This is your journey, but I'm gonna be checking in regularly.
yeah,
As long as you let me check in regularly
yeah,
and you're honest with me, I don't care what your path is.
yeah.
So, but that was new for me because I have always, um, the higher power has always been a part of the recovery journey that I've experienced as an outsider looking in.
Yeah.
So,
I often feel like I just ask the most pertinent questions to me are, you know, what do you think and what part did you play in this? That comes up every day in whether what I do for work, what I
mhm,
do with just fellowshipping with my friends, you know, like,
yeah,
well, what part did you play in this? Or let me tell you what part I played in this because
right,
like I know like we need to look at my actions because I'm the one
accountability,
that dictates what is going on around me.
right.
And often, you know, what do you think? You know, because every person's opinion matters. You know?
And I know for our experience that accountability, it's a tough road for people to go down until they get used to going down it. That first journey of going down accountability, it's a tough one for people who have never taken accountability to start now owning that. So um, I think for my experience, I was trying my hardest in my family with Stephen, trying to tell him, listen, I know what the truth is for me. If you don't wanna take accountability, that's on you. My boundary's right here,
Yeah.
and I know where the accountability what my part of it is, I can't I go, "You're gonna have to own your own at some point, either by choice or you're gonna find it out. It's gonna come back to you in another way." And that's what we've done as a family. It's how we managed with accountability. A lot of times I was notorious for going, "Okay, but where's your accountability?"
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Nobody likes to hear a mom say that, but,
Absolutely.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the framing of, well, what part did you play in it?
Right.
You know, and like oftentimes you just let someone start to tell the story and they're gonna work it out themselves.
Yeah.
You know, you never have to tell like I think especially in like, I mean, I'm blessed to be in the role I'm in, you know, and I've learned that if I'm talking more than 20% of the time, I'm not doing my role right, you know, as any effective leader, whether it's in recovery or just the leader of a household, you know, the spiritual leader of a family, you know, just in a friendship.
Yeah.
You know, oftentimes we just need to be heard, you know?
Absolutely. I don't know where you get all this wisdom at but it's good. I can appreciate what you're saying here. Um, how much of a relationship do you still have with your brother?
I was down there last Tuesday. That's like I get one day off. Well, of my own choice, I
Mhm.
get one day off. I don't wanna make it sound as if, like, I'm worked to the bone, like, I do
Right.
it, um, but of my own like, I work a lot, you know, because it keeps me busy and sane, but, I do take Tuesdays to, you know,
Yeah.
do something for myself, and so, I went down there and seen him. He's getting married, buying a house,
Oh
you
my
know, he's
gosh.
no longer in the 417 either, he's in, Jefferson City.
Okay. Jeff City.
So, yeah, so we're
The
really close.
573.
Yeah,
He's in
it's
the
absolutely,
573.
yeah. We're close, man, closer than we'd ever been, and, you know, in a healthy way, you know, like,
That's
we have
great.
things that, you know, like, we don't live the same lifestyles, like we're just branching into, things that we're good at.
Yeah.
And it's cool to be two different people and still be closer than we ever were. Because for a long time, we were interchangeable, just the same dirtbag, just in different clothes, because we did the same thing to the same people and we sat in the same cells.
Mhm.
And now both of us are growing into two men that we can be proud of and, and talk about mom and dad and be like, they would be proud of us.
Yeah,
And
imagine that
uh,
conversation.
it's cool.
That probably is an amazing conversation to be there and be able to say that.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm glad that you still have, a family member. That's uh, there's nothing like the connection of family. And brothers have a bond. I have 2 boys. Or I did have 2 boys, and it kind of the realization hit me that my youngest son, um, held the hand of his brother when he passed, but his brother won't be here for him,
Yeah.
so he's by himself now. So that connection, that bond between brothers is, as a mom that raised boys, there's nothing that made my heart happier when they were working on something or being ornery with each other.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you probably had a lot of that too as a child.
Yeah, so, I mean, we were close, but I don't want it to go unsaid that I mean, him and I weren't blood, so, like, that's something that I mean, your youngest son doesn't necessarily ever have to be alone either. You're only ever alone by choice,
Right.
like, that's,
Absolutely.
like, I'm surrounded by people that care about me. That's why I
Yeah.
say I'm home now. I'm highly involved in Narcotics Anonymous in the Kansas City area,
Mhm.
and to me, NA always stands for never alone, never
Never alone. I agree.
if you're ever in isolation, it's because you're in a self-imposed isolation, and that's a prerequisite for relapse.
Yeah.
That's point blank. But I'm surrounded by people that care about me every day, and I'm blessed. Like my family is at the Healing House right now.
I love that. So for me, I know that my biggest thing about trying to keep my family intact with Stephen, running amok and being a mess was I always kept that family connection, meeting him where he was at, telling him he was worthy of recovery. And I know not every person that's in active addiction has families that do that. I know that we were not the norm when it came to that. I think it's becoming more normal now that people understand that tough love was really not an effective process. So for you to find the healing house gave you that unconditional love, the support that, listen, you're going to stumble, but we're here. We're going to stand here and stand in the gap for you. You know, for the folks that people that don't have that support system, Healing House is a huge asset to them,
Absolutely.
in the recovery industry. And I think if we can step back as a society and look at those programs that are like that, I think we'll do justice to the recovering community or bringing more recovery to people that need it if we'll shift away from the old stereotypical tough love, let them completely fail, let them hit rock bottom. I think rock bottom is death for a lot of people.
That is, yeah.
And do we really wait for them to die?
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
and I know for me, I couldn't do that. And not that I had it in my mind ever, but as a parent, subconsciously, I think I was always preparing to be able to live with myself after he passed. What can I live with what I did while he was alive? And to me, it was meeting him where he was at, doing what I could live with, protecting my boundaries, self care, but always letting him know he was worthy of recovery. He was worthy of whatever it took to get him there, and that you could always start over building from where you're at. So I think recovery community providing that for people. I mean, I know that there are families that are wore out from their addict, that, person that was in active addiction. I know they're wore out. And some families have generational addiction, and so they don't even recognize how to get out of it. So I think a Healing House and other recovery programs like the Healing House that provides that unconditional love, man, our communities need more of that instead of more tough love, people spouting at, saying, you know, I mean, even in the recovery community, when Stephen was running an active addiction, I would have people tell me, "You need to get out of his way." And I would be like, "What? What do you mean get out of his way?" You know? And the shift has changed in the last few years of doing what you can live with versus get out of his way. I'd love to see more family involved in the recovery community because I think for us, we felt left out. Like Stephen would go to a 30-day program. Families need 30 days of education and support as well, but we don't really get it. Maybe more now, but back then we didn't get anything. We were told, go home, don't call, don't come by. We'll have you at the end of the 30 days, we'll have you come in for a day of family. And I'm thinking, what an injustice for the reunification of the family to not have that family component. And I know Bobby Joe's got a family program that they're working on.
Yeah.
I loved what I started hearing about.
Actually, so last week, we've partnered with First Call.
Yeah.
And when we have a family, like where it's it's a meeting for family members to come in. And
Love it.
like Healing House and First Call have just started last week.
Yeah.
For like I would say an expounding of Al-Anon and a much more effective processing group for family members to be able to talk in a safe space and then be able to meet with their family member that's actively participating in the Healing House program.
Oh, you're singing the words I've needed to hear. I love that. I spoke with Bobby Joe back at Christmas time when I first met her that my not for profit was about supporting the families. And once a year, we're preparing to do a once a year retreat where the whole weekend is focused on the family members with a guest speakers coming in, some group therapies, as well as, do a luncheon and then swap each group out to do self-care in the afternoon and, provide that much needed care for those family members. Because I know for us, there was no self-care happening because I was in the dance right along with him. He might have been, in the streets running and securing his drugs. I was constantly worried and chasing after him, trying to figure out what I could do to convince him to come back home or convince him to get recovery. So the family members need that extra layer of support as well. So
Absolutely.
I love seeing recovery programs realizing the benefit the family plays in the recovery process.
Absolutely.
So,
I think they'll tell you health, home, community, and purpose. Like that's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs that can be boiled down into 4 words. And and family is a huge part of community and home. You
yeah,
know, like I mean, half of what you need is some people you can call your family
yeah. Yeah, whether that's, your self-made family or your
or your blood.
birth-given
Yeah,
family.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, for sure. I have lots of friends that I won't end a phone call without saying, "I love you." And
Absolutely.
I have some family members I won't pick up the phone to call them.
Yeah,
So, blood doesn't make the family, it's the community and the connection and the bond that you share with them, for sure.
absolutely.
Um, and so your time at the Healing House, tell me a little bit about that journey. Tell me, when you first entered, and then,
Um,
um,
So I came with the original commitment of I was going to stay for 6 months, and truthfully, within a matter of a few weeks, I started to feel something that I'd never felt before. You know, like which was a bond with people outside of prison. You know, like I really and like and the coming to the realization that for so long I'd felt alone. And then when I got locked up, I was surrounded by people that, although they were a captive audience in my mind, they were my friends. And, like I found at Healing House, you know, that I could be a productive member of society and still have this, this bond and feeling of community around me, people that genuinely care.
mhm, friends by choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they weren't locked in there with
Yeah.
me, you know. And so, I, began to volunteer my time, and because of that, started to meet people that seemed that I was genuinely concerned for the sake of my fellows as well as myself, and was blessed with an opportunity rather early on to get involved with leadership there at the Healing House. Shameless plug for Joey Thomas on that one. I love you, bro. Um, and and since then have been nothing but built up to like that's where all my wisdom comes from, is those people that have blessed me, like none of it's mine. It was just the people that came before me that that sat down and took the time to tell me those things, and I took it to heart, because we're ultimately a peer led and peer driven
Right.
organization. And I think any successful recovery program is, like, if you haven't lived it, like, I'm not going to respect what you have to say about it.
Absolutely.
you
I'm
know
glad you said that. Um, you know, I, I started this not for profit, and I have to say that I'm staying in my lane of the family. I have never struggled with addiction or alcoholism, so I can only speak on the experiences that I had coming from the family side of it, coming from the mother of it, watching the trauma play out and watching my son suffer through it. Would I be able to understand in his, of his point of view? No. I
Absolutely.
will never be able to understand that because I don't have that same affliction. But I can sit with a mother.
Or Nina. It sounds like you
Yeah, I'm very
definitely are.
close
You're
with
yeah,
Nina.
you're
Yeah.
definitely afforded, like none of us are an island.
Right.
So you still have people in your life
Oh
that
yeah.
together
Yeah.
they're you're too great, or a greater sum than the two of you alone.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And you know, so that's the direction I work at is that family, that's the focus I stay on because that was the path of which it introduced me to this struggle of addiction as through the eyes of the family.
Absolutely.
Um, and I have to say that because of that lived experience, that's where I focus at. Where when you're talking about somebody that comes and talks to you, if they don't have that lived experience, it doesn't, you're not taking it to heart, or
Absolutely.
you don't feel seen or heard, possibly. I feel the same way. For people to try to comfort me or soothe me, if they, one, haven't been in active addiction and have seen the hurt and pain on their parents' face, they're never going to understand where I'm at. Or if they've not been a parent who has, you know, waited for that phone call,
Yeah.
they will never understand my path. So and it took me to get to here for me to realize, oh, I can't fix or give a whole lot to this person because I didn't walk the path they're on.
Yeah.
And when we can finally come to that, we can recognize we both have an experience, but yours is different than mine. I'm not going to be able to help you, but I'm going to stand beside you while you're doing
Exactly,
it.
and we can do it together.
Yeah.
That's what I loved whenever you first started telling me about what your organization was
Hmm.
about, because, like, we do, like, just the ripple of, like, like, I just left a wake of destruction in my life. I've never been on the other side that you
Hmm.
were, like,
Yeah.
where, like, I genuinely just wanted to save someone. I was always the person that were trying to save.
Right.
And so for you to step back and do something that seems so novel, and it's crazy for me to think that, like, focusing on the families of addicts,
Hmm.
for me to even to say that's a novel concept is strange. You would think more people would be out there doing it. So what you're doing is an absolute blessing to the recovery community, because you're going to help more people. Because for every one addict, there's at least three people that love them that
Right.
have been hurt.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and even the ones that here's a concept. Here's one that'll blow your mind. Um, I married my husband 4 months before. Okay, I'll take this back. Da, 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 da. I married my husband. No, I'll take this even back a little further. I began to date my husband while Stephen was in prison,
Right.
and he'd never been around it. And I tried to warn him ahead of time. I tried to warn him about me, not necessarily my son, but I tried to warn him about the insanity that enters my life and the change that comes over me as the parent, and the toxicity that happens in that relationship. And some people like to call it enabling. I choose not to use the word enabling because, I mean, there is enabling that happens, but it's not intentional. Your parent is only trying to help save you.
Yeah.
And I tried to explain all of that to him, but until he got to watch it firsthand, there's no way he could understand it.
Yeah, you couldn't.
Then we brought Stephen into our home. And then this man who had never seen it, never been around it, had no idea, but he was along for this ride that he didn't ask for, somehow or another bonded with my son. They had nothing in common, farthest from two ends of the spectrum. And never at one point did he ever say, "Don't go to him. Don't bring him into my house." Never at any point. That family connection had already been developed. And I shared with you that we had a documentary. My husband's a man of few words, and
I
I probably
respect that.
he just is. And so I don't know that I'd ever heard directly out of his mouth his perspective, but sitting down with the film crew, and I was trying to stay out of the house to give him some privacy, but I'd step back in to get something. To hear him say it was a train wreck, that he wasn't gonna leave me alone to have to manage by myself, and that, no, he didn't enjoy a lot of what was happening, but he had to be the rock that held it together, so I always had a place to come back to. That I might have to go out in the streets, and I might have to go hunt him down, and I might have to go pull him out of a trap house and go spend 2 days with him in a hotel to get him into, you know, detox, whatever. He was always the rock that reminded me, I still have to go back home,
Absolutely.
and so that connection of family needs to be represented too. There's parents and step parents out there trying to manage this, and if our story helps create this bond of, "Oh, we're not alone. Oh, you've gone through this before?" Because most generally, parents feel like, at least we did, I felt like nobody else is experiencing this crazy. Nobody else is is going through this level of drama that we are, and we don't wanna tell anybody about it. We're shamed by it, we're embarrassed of it, we're trying to figure out how do we manage it without everybody knowing. We're living double lives, going to work every day, nothing's wrong at home, while I'm getting my phone is blowing up. I got 15 phone calls coming in because, he wants $30,
Yeah.
and he's gonna blow my phone up until he gets it.
Yeah.
You know, those are the things that parents need to know they're not alone in, that we've experienced it too. So that in itself is the nutshell of what I wanted to do, is to try to create a community, the same kind of community that recovery has worked for people that are looking for recovery for the parents.
Yeah. And it's all recovery. Like, that's an all-inclusive word.
Right.
We recover together,
Right.
I'm just trying not to use, and like you're that sounds like you're trying to heal from, your son's
Mhm.
behavior while he was in active use.
Absolutely. Yeah, and even during the period of time that because he was injured, and then we had a long period of recovery right here in this house, and then, even though his recovery was forced upon him because of his circumstances, we still tried to work towards getting him into recovery in some way, outpatient recovery services, AA, NA, whatever we could get on board for. But at the whole time, I was searching for something for me. Yeah, I had gone to a few Al Anon meetings. It didn't really click with me,
Yeah.
but there's just not much out there for families. And that was the biggest thing I wanted to do, is create a platform, a social media platform, so that even if it's just a 2-minute video, somebody went, "Ah, yes, I've been there."
Yeah.
Or if it becomes they're listening in on a podcast and hear a story that they can relate to, or the documentary that we just filmed. Those were my goals, is to get these stories out in front of moms and dads, sisters, siblings, brothers, whoever. Spouses, as a mother, our heart is designed and wired to never give up on our children. But as a spouse, that's a different story. Spouses walk away all the time. So we need to provide them with the recovery community as well so that they have that support, because without support, they'll eventually walk to where they will get support, you know?
Have you ever heard of the 12 steps for everyone?
Yes, I have.
You know the one word difference between the 12 steps for everyone and the 12 steps for Alcoholics Anonymous? It's in step 1, it's instead of saying I'm powerless over alcohol, it says I'm powerless over my emotions.
Yes.
You know, like that's the only
Yeah, it's
difference.
the only
You know,
difference. Powerless over my own emotions. Yeah.
and like that's something that, you know, I lean on very much. You know, like I know it's 12 steps aren't for everyone, but like once I put down the needle, I realized that I was a very damaged person and did not know. And like so like getting sober underpins everything that I do. But it's not getting sober is the easiest part of recovery, you know, and like but like the active journey of
I was
like,
going
you
to
know,
say,
turning
go in deeper with that. Being
yeah.
sober.
It's the easiest part, you know, and that's scary. It's a scary concept to people in recovery, whether or not you're, you know, whatever you're recovering from
Mhm.
is the healing afterwards, you know, and it's your every day, you know, because it's so easy to fall back, you know, it's so easy to go back, you know, they say it's a couple steps to go back to where you started, but it's a mile-long journey to get where you were,
Yeah.
you know, and like so like that's for me, you know, like I often at this point like I'm not, you know, I am working just the 12 steps for everyone because like I have to check my pride, you know, I have to
Mm-hmm.
check my anger, you know, my ability to, you know, my ability to just
To regulate.
absolutely yeah.
Just regulate.
Yeah, just to live on a day-to-day basis, you know, and like and love myself for where I'm at and know that things aren't always going to be as good as they are today, but they're never gonna be as bad as they were, and I'll make it through what no matter what happens, I'm gonna make it through it, you know?
Very insightful. I love that. That to me is that speaks volumes on your journey,
Yeah.
to be able to articulate that and be able to, you've walked it, you have felt it, you have lived it, and this is the outcome of the work that you've been putting into yourself.
Yeah.
Investing in yourself.
And I think it would work, I mean, for any family member
Yeah.
to know that, you know, like, I respect, you know, a mother's love for their child, you know, and, like, the emotions that come along with
Yeah.
that, you know? Like, that's, you know, an active part of any 12-step recovery
I think
program.
so too. I would agree with that completely. And um and Nina, which is Stephen's former girlfriend before he passed, she's very active in NA and still attends meetings for herself, and has had. Um, she had just had sobriety or recovery right before Stephen passed. She had just made that commitment. I would say within the 30 days before he passed away, which in itself is a miracle that she was clear-minded and not in it so that she could be with him in the very end. We kinda sometimes I look back at that and I go, how did that happen?" The timing of that was not coincidence,
God,
right?
is that you?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, because I've sat back and I went, "If she would have not been clean, I wouldn't have been able to find her, for one."
Yeah.
Um, and then she would have lived with the regret. And I don't know that we could have gotten her back from that level of regret. So grateful that she had found that sobriety before that happened, but the impact on what she went through with losing Stephen and us, I think some of it is also with us covering her and saying, "We got you, girl."
Yeah,
I think that helps with her sobriety, you know?
absolutely. I
Eh
would say more so you guys being there for her, because the loss was one thing, you
Mhm.
know, and like that's like, you know, but like the fact that you're there for her, it's an everyday thing.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, we made that decision as a family, in this house during Stephen was in a coma, for 4 or 5 days before, life support was taken. and my husband and I said, because we brought her home, we wouldn't let her be by herself in those days because it was so touch and go, and we would share with him and I just said, well, we have to keep her here. We have to, give her the support because she's not going to be okay. And here I am, a mom grieving, preparing for the loss of my son, but I was more worried about her because I needed her to be okay. I needed her to survive this. And we made that decision and never once looked back. She's our Nina. And my son, I've told this story a million times. My son brought her home the very first time, bebopping through that back door and said, "Hey, Mom, I got something for you. Her name is Nina."
Right.
And we love that because um, she, my husband says she's the gift that keeps on giving. But that's part of our healing journey too, is that we provide that love and support for her. I know my son is very happy that we've done that for her. I know that that was one of the things I can honor him with. That was the love of his life. So she'll be the love of our life too, you
Absolutely.
know. So, um curious, where are you at now with where you sit with Healing House, and where do you want to go?
Oh man. Oh, that's a tough one. I know the conversations that I've had behind the scenes with
Mhm.
people. So, but I don't feel comfortable putting all of that out into an open forum.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Where a
What's your
year from now,
five-year plan?
a
Yeah.
year from now, I will be setting I'll be a certified alcohol and drug counselor through the state of Missouri.
Love it.
So there's that. My heart lies with housing
Mhm.
and like I just where I'm at right now is like I've got a nice car, money that I'm able to invest, an apartment, a great girlfriend,
That's awesome.
like everything and more importantly, I have the fellowship that the NA and the Healing House of all of like
You have
most
the
importantly
foundation.
have afforded me. So I'll just phrase it as my dream would be I would love to get to continue to grow with the Healing House and begin to work in not just reentry housing but the work for the entire housing program.
Love that.
I would love to see us to get to implement that more, and I think that I'm in the right place to do whatever I want right now. So I don't have any intentions of going anywhere. Mom will tell you I'm a lifer. I've
Mhm.
never thought I'd end up in Northeast Kansas City, that's for sure. But at this point, like I'm
Yeah.
investing in the neighborhood, looking at real estate to buy, and
Love
like
it.
I'm building a life there. And yeah, so right now, I think I don't know is probably the most I would tell my guys that's the most appropriate answer.
Right. But
Like
you're opening the doors that are being presented to you.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, and like I'm building a future no matter what happens. Like I know I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Like I every day because like look, our organization, mom's a dreamer, if not evidenced by everything that
Yeah.
goes on
Oh,
around there.
yeah.
So who knows? We make plans and God laughs.
Right.
So but
Isn't that the truth?
but I have the utmost faith that everything is only going to continue to get better in the long term.
I love
So
that. So is yeah, I'm trying to figure out how do I ask this. So do you want to share with us a little bit about your significant other that you have a friend you want?
no, I
Yeah.
don't like I would she's great. She's in recovery too.
Awesome.
Um and you say I'm glad I met you, Summer. That probably was like the last piece as a man that I was
Mhm.
really missing in my
Yeah.
life.
Companionship's important.
Yeah, so I think it's too early to say much anything else,
Yeah.
but like I never never had a woman that's in any way made me wait for just everything.
Mhm.
And she is definitely making me making me prove myself.
Making you earn
Yeah.
her time.
And that is I
Good for her.
respect that, and that's probably like more and more. I actually called my sponsor on the way up here
Mhm.
to tell him that. Like
Yeah.
like I'm like so it's funny you ask that, I
Yeah.
guess. But yeah, like I'm
Love
like
it.
I'm
I
so
already like her. I don't know who
yeah.
she is, but I already like having her firm boundaries in place. That's great.
Yeah, it's
That's something we forget to tell women.
yeah, absolutely. And that's what I desperately need. Like I need someone to take care of me
Mhm.
and for me to be able to make them feel safe.
Yeah.
Like I've never been married, no kids.
Mhm.
And like so I'm finally at a point in my life where I think like my end game is
Well, this girl's smart because she knows you're a catch.
yeah.
And so this girl's smart. She knows you're a catch, and she knows that if you're gonna be serious about her, you're willing to go through what she needs you to do to prove it.
I guess I like the way you said that.
Yeah.
I'll make sure
Yeah,
I'll make sure she hears this.
She'll watch this. She'll hear it.
I'll make sure she hears
Yeah.
it.
Tell her that we'd love to talk to her too. If she has a story, we'd love to sit down and
She's
visit.
got one, that's for sure.
Okay.
That's for
Well,
sure.
you make sure that we get a chance to talk to her. So, I like what your future plans are, that you're leaving the doors open. Your plans are is to stick with the healing house. Um, and as far as you're gonna set roots down in the Northeast area.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that.
It's home now. Like nowhere better for me. Like I said, it's Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, and like I drive up and down those streets, and people honk and wave, and stop it. Like I was at Colin's house last night. I spent about 30 minutes over there with
Yeah.
a good friend of mine. Um, and like I would be remiss if I didn't say, like there are hard parts of this. Like things aren't always just cotton candy and rainbows. Like I've been to more funerals. We just had a funeral Saturday.
Yeah.
But like that, like those are also the good parts that you don't appreciate. Like as hard as those things are, if not for the bad points, I would never appreciate all the good that I've got in my life. Like I have to have the juxtaposition, and to be able to make it through that sober, surrounded by people that care about me, at the end of the day means more to me than anything
That's
else.
powerful. That's powerful. Have you ever come across, or have you ever thought what you would say if you came across any of your friends from your past?
Yeah, we don't have to live like that no more. Like that's it. Like that's it for real.
Yeah.
It was like all I can do is show you. Stick around. Mom will tell you don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle happens.
Right.
You just gotta keep going. And just the day I woke up and realized that I was never gonna be in prison again, was the most freeing feeling of my life.
I bet. So the next time you have to pick somebody up at the bus station
Tomorrow morning,
tomorrow morning,
4:15.
do you have your speech prepared? Do you have it?
Welcome home.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say. And
I love your story. I love the plans that you have. I knew that when I met you, just even though it was through a Zoom, I knew that there was a connection there, that we were gonna be able to sit down and have a great conversation. So I can't thank you enough for joining us today and sharing your story, because I think it gives hope to a lot of people who are out there still struggling or early in recovery, and they're sitting there going, I don't know if I can do this, when they can look at you and say, look at the life he's built. That's the door that you're opening, and you're leaving it open for the ones behind so they can come through it right behind you. So I thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story, and introducing me to some of the guys in your program. Because
anytime.
yeah, last week we had them up there, or 2 weeks, no, yeah, 2 weeks ago we had them help us with an event. Great bunch of guys.
Absolutely.
Well, Tyler, thank you so much for joining us today. So we're going to say goodbye to our audience. So thank you guys for joining. Are you on any social media?
I'm not.
Okay.
No, just for the sake of my mental health.
Okay. Well, you can still put comments down on any of the social media that you happen to watch this podcast on. I'll be sure to let Tyler know the encouragement. So please, by all means, leave your comments down there so that we can get these messages of encouragement back to Tyler and the guys that he works with. You guys, thank you so much for joining Beyond the Storm, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you.